My daughter traveled with family, left me the dog. I chose Maldives instead. The kitchen glowed under the soft amber light of a chandelier, its crystals catching the flicker of candles Laura had arranged on the oak dining table. She moved with practiced grace, her hands deftly stirring a pot of simmering stew, the air thick with the scent of rosemary and thyme. For weeks, she'd planned this evening, envisioning her daughter Emily's return as a moment to knit the family closer. Her heart fluttered with anticipation, though a quiet ache lingered. Years of small slights had left her wary, yet hopeful. She smoothed her apron, its faded floral pattern a relic of countless meals prepared for others, and glanced at the clock. Emily's train would arrive soon. Outside, the December dusk draped the suburban street in a hush, broken only by the crunch of Michael's boots on the frosted driveway. He stomped in, cheeks ruddy from the cold, and tossed his scarf onto the couch. "Smells good, Laura," he said, his voice warm but distracted, already turning to the television. Laura smiled faintly, her fingers tightening around the ladle. She wanted to ask about his day, to share the small joy of her preparations, but his attention was elsewhere, as it often was. Instead, she turned to the living room, where Emily's younger cousins sprawled on the rug, their laughter rising over a board game. The house felt alive, and Laura clung to that energy, pushing down the familiar pang of being unseen. The front door burst open, and Emily swept in, her wool coat dusted with snowflakes that melted into tiny beads on the hardwood. "I'm back," she called, her voice bright with triumph. She held up a sleek leather briefcase, her grin wide. "And I've got news," landed a $5,000 bonus. The room erupted. Michael leapt from the couch, clapping her shoulder with pride. "That's my girl," he boomed. The cousins swarmed, their questions tumbling over one another. Laura stepped forward, a tray of warm biscuits in her hands, her smile tentative but genuine. "Emily, you must be starving," she said softly. "I made your favorite." Emily's eyes flicked to her, then away. "Maybe later, Mom," she said, already turning to Michael. Laura's chest tightened, the tray suddenly heavy. The family gathered in the living room, the fire crackling as Emily basked in their admiration. Laura hovered at the edge, setting out plates of food no one reached for. She watched Emily, her daughter's sharp confidence a stark contrast to the girl who once clung to her hand. Laura's pride mingled with a quiet grief. She'd poured herself into raising Emily, yet now stood outside her orbit. As the evening wore on, Emily announced gifts, pulling brightly wrapped packages from a bag. Michael received a sleek watch, the cousins got gadgets, and even the neighbors, dropping by, left with trinkets. Laura waited, her hands clasped, hoping for a small gesture. Emily's eyes met hers, a glint of mischief in them. "Oh, Mom, yours is special," she said, kneeling by the dog's bed in the corner. Laura's breath caught as Emily tugged a crumpled envelope from the sweater of their aging terrier, Rufus. The room stilled, all eyes on her. She opened it, her fingers trembling, and read the note inside. "Your gift, watch Rufus while we're in Hawaii." A chuckle rippled through the family, Michael's loudest of all. Emily smirked, as if it were a clever joke. Laura's face burned, the words blurring on the page. "Dog sitting," she said, her voice low but sharp. Emily shrugged. "You love Rufus. It's perfect." The cousins giggled, and Michael waved it off. "Come on, Laura, don't be dramatic." The room spun, each laugh a needle in her skin. She set the envelope down, her movements deliberate, and looked at them, her family, who saw her as little more than a fixture. Something snapped. Laura's vision cleared, the weight of years, meals cooked, tears dried, dreams deferred, crashing over her. "I'm done," she said, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. Emily's brow furrowed. "Mom, what?" Laura didn't answer. She walked to the hall closet, pulled out her coat, and began packing a bag. The chatter behind her faltered. Michael called out, "Laura, you're overreacting," but she didn't turn. She zipped the bag, her heart pounding with a clarity she hadn't felt in years. The front door was heavy, the cold air a shock as she stepped into the night. Snowflakes stung her cheeks, but she kept walking, the glow of the house fading behind her. For the first time, she wasn't looking back. The highway stretched before Laura, a ribbon of asphalt glinting under the moon's pale gaze. Her old sedan hummed, its dashboard lights casting a faint glow across her knuckles, which gripped the wheel with quiet ferocity. Each mile carried her further from the house that had caged her spirit, yet her mind churned with echoes of Emily's dismissive smirk and Michael's careless laughter. She'd given them everything, her youth, her dreams, her voice, only to be handed a dog's leash as reward. The injustice seared her, but beneath it, a flicker of defiance sparked. She pressed the accelerator, the engine's roar a proxy for the scream she'd swallowed for decades. Her phone buzzed relentlessly in the passenger seat, its screen flashing Emily's name. Laura ignored it, letting the vibrations fade into the hum of the road. When she finally pulled into a rest stop, the neon sign of a diner buzzing faintly, she opened the messages. "Mom, this is ridiculous. You're acting like a child over a joke." Another, "You're embarrassing us. Come home." The words stung, each one a barb aimed at her resolve. Emily's tone, sharp and entitled, mirrored Michael's from years past, demanding her compliance, assuming her return. Laura's throat tightened, not with tears but with a dawning clarity. Her daughter saw her as a shadow, not a person. She deleted the texts, her finger hovering over the block button, not yet ready to sever that thread. In the diner, Laura sipped bitter coffee, the mug's warmth grounding her. The place was sparse, a few truckers hunched over plates, their murmurs blending with the jukebox's faint croon. She traced the rim of the cup, her thoughts drifting to the sacrifices she'd buried, art classes abandoned, a teaching career sidelined, all to prop up Michael's ambitions and Emily's rise. She'd convinced herself it was love, but now it felt like erasure. The waitress, her name tag reading Clara, offered a tired smile. "Rough night?" she asked. Laura nodded, her voice soft. "Rough life." Clara's eyes held a knowing glint, and Laura wondered what stories she carried. The exchange, brief as it was, stirred something, a hunger to reclaim the self she'd let slip away. Back at the house, the family lounged in the aftermath of Laura's departure. Michael sprawled on the recliner, a beer in hand, his chuckle dismissive. "She'll be back by morning," he said, waving a hand as if swatting a fly. Emily paced, her phone clutched tightly, her confidence fraying. "She's just trying to make us feel bad," she snapped, but her voice wavered. The cousins, now subdued, exchanged glances, sensing the fracture in their perfect evening. Michael's sister, Karen, chimed in, her tone syrupy. "Laura's always been dramatic. She'll come crawling back." Their words filled the room, a chorus of denial, but Emily's fingers trembled as she typed another message, her bravado masking a flicker of unease. What if Laura didn't return? Laura, meanwhile, had checked into a small motel, its walls paper-thin, the air heavy with the scent of stale smoke. She lay on the bed, staring at the ceiling's water stains, and let her mind wander to a dream she'd buried, a solo trip to the coast, where she'd sketch the waves and breathe without obligation. The idea felt reckless, indulgent, yet her pulse quickened. She opened her laptop, booked a rental cottage by the sea, and began posting about her journey on a whim, a quiet blog she'd started years ago but rarely touched. Day 1, I left. The road is wide, and so is the future. The words felt like a vow. By morning, a handful of strangers had left comments, their encouragement a lifeline she hadn't expected. Emily, scrolling through her phone at dawn, froze when she saw the post. Her jaw tightened, a mix of anger and disbelief swirling in her chest. Laura, her predictable, pliable mother, was out there, claiming a life without them? She fired off a new message, her words venomous. "You're spending Dad's money on this tantrum? Pathetic." But as she hit send, a knot formed in her stomach. Laura's silence wasn't just defiance, it was power. Emily tossed her phone aside, her mind racing. She'd always controlled the narrative, but now, for the first time, she felt it slipping. Laura, miles away, slept soundly, the ocean's distant call already reshaping her heart. The coastal wind whipped through Laura's hair as she stood on a rocky outcrop, the ocean's roar wild him below. Her sketchbook lay open in her hands, its pages fluttering with half-formed lines of charcoal waves. Each stroke felt like a reclamation, a tether to the artist she'd abandoned decades ago. The solitude was intoxicating, yet her silence, her refusal to answer Emily's venomous texts, carried a weight of its own. She wasn't hiding, she was choosing herself, and that choice pulsed with both freedom and fear. Her phone, tucked in her pocket, remained off, a deliberate barrier against the family's pull. She inhaled the salt air, her resolve hardening like the cliffs beneath her feet. Back home, Emily's unease festered. She sat at the kitchen table, the same one Laura had adorned with candles days ago, now bare except for a cold coffee mug. Her fingers scrolled through Laura's blog, each post a dagger to her pride. Strangers' comments, "You're so brave," mocked her own narrative of Laura as weak. Emily's chest tightened, a cocktail of guilt and defiance. She typed a new message, softer this time, her voice almost pleading. "Mom, can we talk? I didn't mean to upset you." She stared at the screen, waiting for the familiar dots of a reply, but none came. The silence gnawed at her, exposing a truth she'd dodged. She needed Laura's presence, even if she'd never valued it. Laura's days by the sea blurred into a rhythm of discovery. She wandered through a seaside village, its cobblestone streets lined with weathered shops. In a bookstore, she bought a journal, its leather cover soft under her fingers, and began writing, not just blog posts, but raw, unfiltered thoughts. I was their foundation, but they built over me. The act of writing unearthed a buried anger, yet also a quiet pride. She wasn't running, she was rebuilding. At a cafe, she overheard women her age laughing, their ease a mirror of what she craved. When one smiled and asked, "Traveling alone?" Laura nodded, her voice steady. For the first time. The woman's nod held no pity, only respect, and Laura's heart lifted, a small victory in a stranger's gaze. Michael, meanwhile, stewed in the family home, his irritation masking a creeping dread. Emily's updates about Laura's blog fueled his unease. Laura wasn't crumbling, as he'd predicted. He paced the living room, the silence of the house amplifying his thoughts. He'd always seen Laura as an extension of himself, her sacrifices a given. Now, her absence felt like a betrayal, though he'd never admit it. "She's making a fool of us," he muttered to Emily, who nodded, her own anger flaring. But beneath her nod, Emily grappled with a flicker of doubt. Had she pushed too far? She shoved it down, clinging to the family's script. Laura was wrong, and they were right. Laura's return was inevitable, but not as they expected. She drove back under a sky bruised with clouds, her bag packed with sketches and journals, her mind clear. At the house, she found Michael in the den, his face a mix of relief and defiance. Before he could speak, she slid divorce papers across the table, her hands steady. "I'm done being invisible," she said, her voice low but unyielding. Michael's jaw slackened, his bluster fading. "You can't be serious," he stammered. Laura met his gaze, her eyes calm, resolute. "I've never been more serious." Emily, entering the room, froze, her voice rising. "Mom, you're tearing us apart." Laura turned to her, unflinching. "You did that when you handed me a leash." The confrontation rippled outward. Emily's anger cracked, revealing a raw edge of fear. She'd lost her anchor, and it terrified her. Michael retreated, his silence a shield against the truth Laura's papers laid bare. Later, Laura's mother, Margaret, arrived, her presence a quiet force. In the garden, under the bare branches of an oak, she took Laura's hand. "Those funds I gave you years ago? They were for you, not them," she said, her voice firm. "Live now, Laura. You've earned it." Laura's eyes stung, not with sorrow but with gratitude. Margaret's words were a key, unlocking a future she'd only dared to dream. As dusk fell, Laura stood alone, the weight of her choice settling, not as a burden, but as wings. Laura sat at a polished mahogany table in her lawyer's office, the air heavy with the scent of leather and old books. Her fingers traced the edge of a manila folder, its contents a shield against the storm she knew was coming. The divorce papers had been served, but Michael's response was predictably combative. He claimed her funds, the ones Margaret had gifted, as marital assets. Laura's jaw tightened at the thought, not from fear but from a fierce clarity. This was no longer about love or loyalty, but power. She'd spent years yielding, now, she'd fight. Her lawyer, Ms. Carter, leaned forward, her voice crisp. "We've got evidence, Laura. He's not as untouchable as he thinks." Laura nodded, her resolve a quiet fire, burning brighter with each step toward freedom. Across town, Emily hunched over her laptop in a dimly lit cafe, her coffee cold and untouched. She'd tried accessing Laura's bank account, a desperate bid to reclaim control, only to find the passwords changed. Panic clawed at her, not just for the money but for what it symbolized. Laura's defiance was rewriting their family's hierarchy. Emily's fingers hovered over her phone, drafting a message she'd never send. "Why are you doing this to me?" Instead, she called Laura, her voice trembling with feigned remorse. "Mom, let's fix this. You don't need to cut us off." Laura's reply was calm, unyielding. "Emily, stop. I'm protecting myself. If you push further, I'll file for a no-contact order." The words landed like a slap, and Emily's facade cracked, tears spilling as she hung up, alone with the weight of her own choices. In the courtroom, Michael's bravado filled the space, his lawyer painting Laura as a spendthrift squandering their shared wealth. Laura sat poised, her gaze steady, though her heart raced. Ms. Carter presented bank records, each page a revelation of Michael's secret accounts and unauthorized withdrawals, money siphoned over years, hidden from Laura's view. The judge's brow furrowed, and Michael's confidence faltered, his fingers drumming nervously. Laura watched, seeing not the man she'd married but a stranger undone by his own greed. She realized then what drove his fight, not love for the money, but terror at her autonomy. Her financial freedom was a mirror, reflecting his own fragility, and he couldn't bear it. Laura's evenings were spent in her small apartment, a rented haven adorned with sketches and seashells from her coastal escape. She poured herself into her blog, now a growing platform where she shared not just her journey but her resolve. A new post read, "Freedom isn't just leaving, it's building something new." Comments flooded in, women sharing their own stories of breaking free. Each message fortified Laura, her purpose sharpening. Yet, as she wrote, memories surfaced, nights soothing Emily's childhood fears, mornings cheering Michael's early successes. The love hadn't vanished, but it no longer bound her. She closed her laptop, her breath steady, and whispered to the empty room, "This is mine now." Emily, meanwhile, unraveled. At home, she paced, her mind a tangle of regret and defiance. She'd always seen Laura as a constant, a backdrop to her own triumphs. Now, with Laura's boundaries firm, Emily faced a void she couldn't fill. She confided in a friend, her voice breaking. "I thought she'd always be there, you know. But I pushed her away." The friend's silence was answer enough, and Emily's heart sank, the truth settling. She'd lost more than control, she'd lost her mother. Michael, too, grappled with his own reckoning, his bluster fading as the legal tide turned. In a rare moment alone, he stared at an old photo of Laura, her smile radiant, and wondered when he'd stopped seeing her. Laura's mother, Margaret, visited one evening, bringing a bottle of wine and a fierce pride. Over glasses clinking softly, she spoke of Laura's strength, her voice thick with emotion. "You're not just surviving, you're thriving. That's what scares them." Laura smiled, her eyes tracing the lines of Margaret's face, seeing her own resilience reflected. The legal battles weren't over, but Laura felt unshackled, her future no longer a question but a canvas. As Margaret left, Laura stood at her window, the city lights a constellation of possibilities. She wasn't just fighting for money, she was claiming her life, and no one would take that from her again. Laura's apartment hummed with the soft clatter of her keyboard, the glow of her laptop casting shadows across a wall adorned with framed sketches. She was recording her first podcast episode, her voice steady yet vibrant, weaving her story of rupture and renewal. This is for the women who've been invisible, who've carried others' dreams at the cost of their own, she said, her words a beacon for listeners she'd never meet. The divorce was finalized, the courtroom battles behind her, but this act of creation, was her true victory. Each sentence she spoke felt like laying bricks for a new foundation, one built on her terms. She paused, sipped chamomile tea, and smiled at the microphone, a quiet thrill in her chest. She was no longer a footnote in someone else's story. Outside, the city pulsed with spring's arrival, cherry blossoms drifting like soft confetti. Laura walked to a nearby park, her journal tucked under her arm, and sat on a bench overlooking a pond. She wrote feverishly, capturing ideas for future episodes, stories of resilience, interviews with women who'd redefined their lives. The act of writing was a mirror, reflecting a Laura she barely recognized, bold, unapologetic, alive. Yet, as her pen moved, a flicker of sorrow surfaced, not for Michael or Emily, but for the years she'd spent doubting her worth. She closed the journal, her gaze on the water's ripples, and whispered a promise to herself, never again. The breeze carried her words away, a vow sealed by the world's quiet witness. The podcast, titled Unbound Voices, surged in popularity, its episodes downloaded by thousands. Laura read listener emails in her apartment, each one a thread in a growing tapestry of connection. A woman from Oregon wrote, "Your story gave me courage to leave a job that crushed me." Another, from London, shared, "I'm starting art school at 50 because of you." Laura's heart swelled, not with pride but with purpose. She'd become a lighthouse, guiding others through storms she'd weathered. Yet, in quiet moments, she wondered about Emily. Did her daughter listen? The thought lingered, unanswered, a loose thread she chose not to pull. Margaret visited often, her presence a steady anchor. One evening, they sat on Laura's balcony, the sky streaked with sunset's fire. Margaret's eyes, lined with age, shone with fierce love. "I watched you endure, Laura," she said, her voice low, resonant. "You carried their weight and never broke. Now, you're soaring." Laura's throat tightened, her fingers curling around her wineglass. She saw her mother's sacrifices mirrored in her own, decades of quiet strength, and felt a kinship deeper than words. "I'm not just surviving, Mom," she said, her smile soft but certain. "I'm building something real." Margaret nodded, her hand squeezing Laura's, a silent hymn of pride. Emily, miles away, lived in the shadow of her own choices. She'd moved to a new apartment, its stark walls a canvas for her unease. Late at night, she listened to Laura's podcast, her earbuds a secret portal to the mother she'd pushed away. Laura's voice, confident, warm, stirred an ache she couldn't name. Emily wanted to reach out, to apologize, but pride chained her tongue. Instead, she wrote a letter she'd never send, its pages stained with tears. "I didn't know how much I needed you until you were gone." The act of writing was a confession, a crack in her armor, but she wasn't ready to face Laura, not yet. Michael, too, grappled with his new reality, his life smaller without Laura's steady presence. He avoided the podcast, but its existence haunted him, a reminder of the woman he'd underestimated. Laura's world expanded with each podcast episode, her voice reaching corners she'd never imagined. She spoke at a local women's conference, her words met with applause that echoed in her bones. As she stood on the stage, the spotlight warm on her face, she saw not just an audience but a future, unscripted, boundless. The girl who'd once dreamed of art school, the wife who'd faded into the background, the mother who'd borne silent wounds, they were all here, woven into a woman who no longer asked for permission to exist. Laura stepped off the stage, her heart full, and walked into the evening, the city's lights a constellation of beginnings. Her path was her own, and she tread it with joy.